Finding a family all-inclusive resort that is going to make everyone happy is not easy, and I know there are so many to choose from. So in this video, I'm going to compare two of the top family all-inclusive resorts in Cancun, the Grand at Moon Palace versus the Hyatt Ziva Cancun, which I've personally been to both of them. Let's start with location. The Hyatt Ziva Cancun is located in the heart of the hotel zone, around 20 to 30 minutes from the Cancun airport. So this could be a plus or a minus for some people. I personally love the hotel zone, but some people do not because it is very busy and there's definitely a lot more people around. You're next to a lot of different hotels and resorts, but I like it because you can go off the resort very easily. So if that's something that you like to do, you can, take the bus to go do some shopping. You can even walk around that resort. So the Grand at Moon Palace is actually located just outside the hotel zone, and it's very close to the airport, closer than the Hyatt's, around 15 to 20 minutes. In fact, I often fly right over it as I'm getting ready to land into Cancun, and it is a little quieter over there. So I should say a lot quieter because you're not necessarily next to other resorts. So some people might prefer that. Next, let's talk about size. This is where there is a big difference because the Grand at Moon Palace is huge. So you need a golf cart basically to get around most of the time, but you also have access to the Moon Palace next door that has two resorts. So you can use a bus to get there, golf carts, but it is very large to navigate. And because of the size, that means it also attracts conventions, a lot of weddings, and even concerts. Dave Matthews has played there before. So I've been to the Grand at Moon Palace 3 times. And the first time, I guess it wasn't such a big deal that we had to take a golf cart everywhere. I guess the kids maybe kind of liked it. But honestly, it just became a nuisance every time that we went. And sometimes they were full, so you had to wait for the next one. And just every time I wanted to go somewhere, I had to go to the golf cart stop. And then the other thing is because it attracts those large groups, it was very hard sometimes to get into restaurants. Again, lots of times the golf carts were full. So if you go there during one of those events, it is extremely crowded and there are long lines for almost everything. Now, the Hyatt Ziva Cancun is smaller, and for me, I personally liked it more. Again, some people might like a big, huge resort where you have to navigate like that. I'm learning as I travel that I do not. I prefer a smaller, walkable resort. There are no golf carts at the Hyatt. Everything is walkable. I think the furthest walk was maybe 10 minutes. So from one side of the beach to the other side of the beach, I think maybe took me 10 minutes to get there. Now, it does still attract weddings and conventions. There was a wedding when we were there. It did not affect our stay at all. It did make the club really active one night, which was fun, but I was not there during a convention, so I don't know how that would necessarily affect it. But in terms of navigating it, I found it much easier to navigate and more enjoyable to navigate than the Grand at Moon Palace. So next, let's go to the activities. I know activities are really important when you're looking for that family all-inclusive resort, just making sure that there are things for the children to do. And does the size of the resort really affect the amount of activities that are offered? Now, since the Grand at Moon Palace is bigger, does it necessarily offer more activities? And I think naturally the answer is yes. And in fact, I do a lot of videos about this resort on my website. I'm going to put them all in the description below. But you get access to the two sister resorts, the Nizuik and the Sunrise. And then at the Grand at Moon Palace, it has its own full-size water park. And it also has a flow rider, actually 2 flow riders. So that might be a deciding factor, especially for some of you moms out there. I know it was for me. I was always looking for the flow rider and the water park at the resort because my son loved it so much. In retrospect, just based on my experience, I will tell you that he really didn't use the water park as much as I thought he would to really make that the deciding factor for which resort I chose. And they also have game rooms where all of the games are included. You don't have to pay money. It's like a little arcade called the Wired Lounge, which my son loved. It did get really, really crowded, but he loved it. And then they have a new thing called the Dreamery, which I don't know much about because it wasn't there when I had taken my kids there. But the point is, it is very focused towards families and towards children, trying to keep them engaged. They have kids clubs. And so just about anything and everything that you can imagine. Now, the Hyatt also has a ton of activities for teenagers and kids because it's geared towards families, maybe just on a smaller scale. So it's not going to have that water park. But what it does have is has a dolphin tank that's right there on site. I know some people aren't fans of dolphins in captivity, but you don't have to go off the resort to swim with the dolphins, which I actually did one time when I stayed at the Grand at Moon Palace. So that could be a bonus. It does have a kids club. It has a teens club. and it has activities going all day long geared towards families and kids. It does not have a flow rider though, so if that's something your kids like, and I think resorts are actually getting away from it just because there are a lot of injuries that happen. So just keep that in mind. And the one thing that really stands out at the Hyatt though, that the Grand doesn't have, are the water activities, which leads me to the next huge difference between these two resorts is the beach. So the first time I went to the Granite Moon Palace, I was shocked at the beach conditions. So it's a beautiful white sand, but the water is unswimmable. And I was such a naive traveler. I had done a lot of research, but I didn't even know that that was a thing. And this is not a seasonal thing. This is something that is year round. It's just something about the location where the seaweed comes in and does not filter out. Because of that, the Hyatt Ziva really wins when it comes to water activities. Yes, at the Grand, you can get the kayaks and go out, but I personally didn't even really want to get near the water. But at the Hyatt Ziva, they can do that. Plus, the snorkeling there is really good, and it's right off the shore. Kids were doing it all day long. It was very safe waters. So you don't even have to go off the resort to do a snorkeling excursion. And like I said, the color of the water there is just insane. The beaches are probably one of the most beautiful beaches that I've seen in the Cancun area. But maybe you're not a beach family, so maybe that's not a big deal. But the water is also very safe. So it's like pool water. It's very shallow. It's very calm. So I really like that as well, especially if you're traveling with younger kids. You don't have to worry about the waves and all of that. So I was just blown away by the beach. Now, one downside of the beach at the Hyatt might be the fact that it's a public beach. And yes, all the beaches are public there, but what I mean, it's in a very crowded location. It's in the hotel zone. So you have people that are not at the resort walking up and down the beach. They actually have two different beaches. And you're also going to see armed guards on the beach because it is in that very public section. I personally felt very safe. I've been to Cancun over 20 times, so it was not an issue for me, but I figured it was definitely worth mentioning. Next, let's go to the pools. Again, this is a pretty big difference because of the size. The Granite Moon Palace has 9 pools, including that water park, versus the Hyatt, which has just the 2 large pools. So if you are a pool family, you could care less about the beach, the Granite Moon Palace may be the way to go. Now, all of the pools are spread out, so you do have to get there via either the bus or the golf carts, whatever it may be, versus the Hyatt, even though they only have 2 pools, they're very large, they're spread out, and they're easily walkable from anywhere at the resort. And at both resorts, they have activities going all day long that will keep your kids entertained and engaged. One thing I didn't mention is that both resorts also have adults only pools. So if you get some time away from your kids, the Granite Moon Palace has one that's kind of in the center. Anybody can access that. That's an adult 18 years and older. And then at the Hyatt, they have a rooftop pool for adults, but I'm pretty sure you have to be staying in the turquoise tower to access it. So if you are staying in the family section, which is probably where you're going to be staying because you're watching this video, I don't think you can necessarily go up. And again, more detail about both resorts are in those videos I mentioned, which you will find in the description. Next, let's get into the food. And this area is pretty comparable despite the size difference. So the Granite Moon Palace has 17 restaurants and 11 bars, and the Hyatt has 10 restaurants and 7 bars and lounges. So not as many, but in terms of the offerings, I think they're very similar. And what both resorts do a good job on is that they have these little pop-up stands where kids can access food almost any time of the day. One thing I also loved about both places is the buffet is open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which is really important when you're traveling with kids because sometimes you don't want to do a sit-down meal. So I really like that. And I think in general, the quality was very, very similar. Both places had really good food. I think sometimes people lean towards the Granite Moon Palace because they have more restaurants and more to choose from, but I thought in general they were very comparable. So which one is the better resort? Well, it really depends on a lot of different factors and what it is that you are looking for in a resort. So for me, I am a beach person and really do prefer now the more walkable resorts. So I would choose the Hyatt Ziva. But if your family doesn't care about the beach and you're more of a pool person and you want that variety of restaurants, then maybe the Grand is better for you. So I will say the last time that I stayed at the Granite Moon Palace, which was my 3rd stay, I swore I would never go back Really because of the crowds. There were so many weddings and conventions. There was long lines at restaurants. You had to wait for the golf carts, and it really just felt like a hassle the entire time I was there. And if you do have any questions, please drop them in the comment section below. I do try to respond to all comments and questions. Or if you've been to these resorts and you want to add your feedback, please include that. And I can actually help book both of these resorts for you. I get special discount pricing with Travelingos for the Hyatt Ziva, and then I do work with Palace Resort members to get you member pricing there. All of that information will be in the description below, and definitely keep following me at 3 Days and Tres Noches. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok, and in a few weeks, I'll be going back to Cancun for another honest review of a resort.